Seems okay so far.
All right, the recording has started, and this is the July 20th, 2020 Crossplane Community Meeting. Normally around the middle of the month, we do a regular release. Regular cadence is mid-month releases. With the 0.13 progress so far, there have been a lot of work on designs and some of the more complicated improvements that we're tackling, like the Crossplane Agent and refactoring package manager, et cetera. So I believe that there were only doc changes that got committed into the main Crossplane repo. So I believe we had talked on Slack about pushing or skipping this mid-month 0.13 release, since there were not code changes that needed to be pushed out from the main Crossplane repo. But the providers do need to be released. We provider AWS, Azure, Microsoft, Alibaba, et cetera, because we did not do those last month, and we have definitely do have some changes that went into there that we want to get pushed out for the community. Is there anything, or Dan or Phil, is there anything to add on 0.13 or that timing of releasing stuff?
Nope, that sounds about right. I think with Nick out and you and Muvafik on later time zones, I could see those going out tomorrow, potentially instead of today, but we might try and get them out today as well. For Azure and Alibaba, I don't think there is a lot of changes, so I have a PR to open on each of them that updates the way providers work, but it's fairly minimal, so we could look at those a little more. But AWS for sure has a ton of new functionality, and I have mentioned below, which we'll talk about a bit, one PR I want to get in there, and then I think GCP is pretty much good to go. So those should just be, we can roll those out, incrementally over the next day or so, and I think that should be fun.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable, that there's not a strict requirement of timing to get those out, and there's not a strict requirement necessarily of making them coincidental or together time. So I will be online because I have a Pacific time zone meeting. I think at like 2 p.m. or so until 3 p.m. Pacific. So I'll be online for another few hours easily here. So no problem. I can help approve pull requests and stuff as needed.
Awesome.
All right, let's talk about some of updates, status updates for some of the big features. I don't think, so Nick, we already said, is alive in Montana, and I don't believe Casey is online today here in the meeting. So is someone available on the code generation provider acceleration, Phil, maybe?
Yeah, I can just give a brief update. So, Casey's in the process of putting his design doc together for the Terraform generation. There was an initial kind of analysis feasibility write-up that was done. And I think that we dropped that in the new providers channel in Crossplane Slack. So you can basically get to that from there. And then we've been having, ongoing discussions with various folks in the community about the different, service operators, if you will, and then how they might relate to Crossplane, and some points of collaboration that we can have around that. So, so that providers channel is basically where we'd like to have that conversation, so that one of the things that Casey's looking at is, in addition to just getting out the Terraform provider acceleration, is actually, since that's with a gRPC API off of a fork child process that basically has the provider implementation in it, looking at creating a more open API at that layer, so that could more easily plug into Crossplane providers. And so kind of working through what should be in that open API at that lower stateless provider layer is something that Casey's basically queued up for discussion in that providers channel as well. So welcome everybody to join that channel, to share notes on, like what y'all have going as far as like metadata sources, code generation, and then, like if you have additional requests for providers or cloud services that are needed. I've seen some discussion over the weekend pop up there already, asking about, like what do we have for some EKS resources, or actually ECR rather. But yeah, so really excited about that. Progress on multiple fronts, and yeah, that's kind of what's going on with the CodeGen provider acceleration.
Awesome, Phil. Thank you. And did you say that the providers channel on Slack is where discussion is going on there?
Yeah. And so we just created that, like last week before that maybe. And so there's a lot of side channel conversations going on at the moment. And so we're hoping that we can kind of bring that together into that public providers channel.
Cool. Let me see if I got a link for it here. Oh, okay. Ta-da. Sounds good. Thanks for the update, Phil. And if we get a status update on the Crossplane agent as well, I know that the design has been merged and MoveOff is working on some implementation stuff, or working on the implementation. Is there any further update or any like risks or blocking things that need to be shared in this venue here?
I don't think so. Yeah. So the agent basically design has been out in PR for a while. It merged last week. We got feedback from various folks in the community on that and incorporated that. So so that was awesome. And yeah, MoveOff is moving ahead with implementation on this, and it looks pretty solid. We might have some additional follow-on things, for basically like surfacing the connection status of an agent in an app cluster to a standalone Crossplane instance if there are multiple agents connected to a single namespace in a control cluster. But apart from those, fit and finish type things, the core of the agent design is pretty solid, and just moving ahead with that.
Awesome, great. And so is the agent here, is the plan to keep it in the contrib organization, or like kind of like while it's being kind of proof of concept, worked on, it'll be here and then we'll move it to the main org?
Yeah, I think that's the plan for it to kind of graduate into the Crossplane org at some point.
And that's actually, I think that's something we should probably follow up on. Is, to my knowledge or recollection, we don't have any more defined process for moving something from the contrib organization to the main organization, and what's the criteria, what is the process. That'd probably be good to write down or formalize more so that it's more clear and consistent on we can have a good answer for if somebody wants to move something into the main org, that's a consistent answer.
Yeah,
I agree, and also we should probably clarify like what you get by being part of Crossplane Contrib. So like probably we'd say like we'll give you maybe some like CI kind of stuff built in if you want to have something in Crossplane Contrib and it's committed to being maintained. I guess that kind of depends on what the bar is for folks getting something into Crossplane Contrib, because I know we want to be relatively flexible with that. And then we also, as part of that effort, might want to discuss kind of like an enhancements proposal process too, to more formalize. As you have mentioned, there have been a lot of designs coming through lately, and they've kind of just been ad hoc review / approved. And the process for each of them hasn't really been necessarily consistent, although it tends to be everyone kind of gets all their things resolved and then we merge. But especially in terms of like once we have a 1.0 offering, we need to have a more formal process for proposing new things as well.
Yeah, that is a good point. Okay. And I was laughing too that while we were looking at this, because in like the contrib, organization, with like a lower bar, more proof of concepts, incubating projects, etc. And the Crossplane agent, the Crossplane agent. So it's like it's very incubating.
There's a lot of pain there right now.
Yeah. We've got to work through it until you.
It's a
you
single
got to spell the
pain.
project name right before you can move into. Yeah. All right, and then Dan, you are a great person to give us a quick update about the package manager refactor.
Yeah, so the pull request is referenced here, and it's honestly a little hard to navigate at this point. I think there's like 160 comments or something like that, which makes sense because this is a pretty large part of how Crossplane is going to work. Looking at a kind of like production ready 1.0 commit to an API level. So as part of the review in that, which it's pretty up to date in terms of things that have been generally accepted. But as part of the review there, we kind of determined we need to be able to kind of play with the mechanics a little bit, I guess, and get some feedback from folks. So just at the very end of last week and this weekend, I created this new repo, which is basically testing out both package manager from like a controller perspective in the cluster, as well as the CLI to be able to build packages. And then you'll also see in the examples repo iteration on what it may look like to write a stack package, which would be kind of like your compositions and stuff like that, and then a provider. So you can kind of see some different layouts there. And then also in the design folder, you'll see notes. So basically, as more functionality is added, things are tested out. You can kind of see some of the scenarios that are run and how that would kind of like affect usage and that sort of thing. So hopefully this can allow us to do things like get feedback from customers and try something out, get feedback from users, and quickly try things out and see if they would work long term. It's a little bit of a difficult situation to be in because we do kind of have this package system right now that we are reliant on, and we kind of need a commitment to a solid API, V1 beta 1, if you will. But we also are still kind of like trying to figure out what all this needs to satisfy. So thanks for the star.
I was surprised there wasn't one already from you.
Yeah. And another thing, well, I mean, it's in my name, so I felt kind of weird about starring it. But if anyone, especially folks on this call right now, if you have thoughts about it or want to like try stuff out, please let me know, or just drop it in Crossplane Slack, and we can like kind of talk about what that experience is like, and maybe even get some distribution going so folks can try it out.
And Dan, is there a good, did you say is there a good entry point here for if folks wanted to try out this experience, or, think about one like an existing package they have, but, building it with these tools instead? Is it obvious like where this should go? Is that examples you said?
Yeah, I mean, examples is where it's kind of like showing some things that would work right now. However, so there's the two parts, the CLI and the manager right now. Right now, the manager has just had some work on it, and it's still pretty rough. But the CLI, I'm starting to look at things like linting and initialization, that sort of thing, but none of them are implemented. So
got it.
There's not a lot to do with it right now. But definitely we'll add to the README, ways to like build this and use it and try it out, and that sort of thing.
Nice. Okay, cool. Sounds great.
And then Dan, just a quick question. So is the intention to get like stage 1 of that landed maybe in the next couple of weeks or week or two as far as the design doc goes, or like how do you expect that to relate to the prototyping you have going on? Do you think that'll, maybe just explain how you think about that?
I think I mean, phase 1 kind of informs or is informed by some of the other decisions that need to be made. So like one of the things we've been talking about lately is if like providers need to be packaged differently than stacks or compositions, in terms of like, do you want, if you have stack packages that rely on other ones, do you need to specify the providers at the top level and those like flow through? So there's a couple different questions there that would inform the API, in my opinion. That being said, if we feel good about it and want to go ahead and implement some of it, I think that would be fine. But I am a little hesitant until we can come to a kind of like conclusion about what we want the user experience to be there.
Okay, makes sense.
And so the next steps, Dan, like we were still trying to drive the design doc to closure, right? Are there one thing I've seen work really well, like on GitLab merge requests, is like they have like a checklist of unresolved issues that they continue to whittle away. And so like you have a PR MR with like 100 plus comments. You know, you can easily see what's still left there. Do we need to do anything to effectively or efficiently drive that PR to close, or like it's under control and you have like the tracking and the help that you or answers that you need?
I would say so. In the design doc, there's a lot of like unresolved things that are mentioned there, and issues that are mentioned that need to be addressed. I think we could go ahead and move forward with merging it as kind of like this is still in draft status, but partially ratified, sort of. Um, I know before Nick headed out, he dropped a comment that he felt good about kind of like the package upgrade mechanism. Um, you know, as far as if we want to move forward with the implementation of that, I think that the rest of it is kind of important. But in terms of just like getting the PR in, you know, just from a functional perspective and review perspective, and then following up, I'd be fine to try and move forward with that.
Yeah, I personally wouldn't say that it's like a critical urge to get it like if it's unresolved or we're able to manage the conversation and follow-up items, then I wouldn't push it necessarily to get into master in like a partially ratified state or anything like that.
Cool.
But yeah, it's more of a question of like, do you feel comfortable and able to, are you aware of the remaining things, and or do you need any sort of guidance or help on driving them?
Yeah, I think I'm aware of the things we need clarity on. Just getting clarity probably is not as clear.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, so that is the status update section. It says my internet is unstable. I'm gonna stop the video here. So let's move down to the next section for communities. Dan, do you want to give us an update of the latest TBS happiness?
Sure. Yeah. So we had kind of a hack episode this week, which was super fun. Where Marcus, who's done a lot of work on Crossplane, came on, and he's now doing a lot of work on the packet side. Still doing some Crossplane stuff though, and so we actually in the 48 hours leading up to it, we added a fair amount of new functionality very quickly to the packet provider in terms of networking capabilities. So that was pretty fun to be able to do, and just drove maturation of that provider, so that was good. Then we showed how to use some of those things, so we have some assets that came out of that. We also looked at the Tinkerbell open source project from Packet, which is what they use to provision their bare metal machines. They're still working on quite a lot of documentation and such around that. So we were actually able to add a little bit of documentation based on the problems that we ran into. But overall, it was just kind of a fun look around. We had some audience participation and that sort of thing. So if you're interested in maybe adding a new resource type to a provider or bootstrapping a new provider, it might be useful in that regard.
Cool. That was a fun episode too. It was cool to see Marcus on there. Nice. Any hints about next TBS episode guest?
No, not yet, but I'll let y'all know when it's ready.
All right. Cool. Okay, then the next section here, not a big update on since distance. The update from last time was that we were accepted to the sandbox and we're actually a sandbox, so that's not going to really top. Onboarding incidents yet continues. We have the mailing list set up. A thing, the trademark, transition process is smoothly. We got the checkbox, but we're string along this check of onboarding. So nothing to report here, but on our way to that.
Your audio is breaking up pretty bad now.
Sorry. Yeah, so we can jump, I think, to the PR here. Needs attention. Did that.
Yeah, this is just this PR has been open for a little while, but I finally got it kind of wrapped up this morning. This is for node groups on EKS. And basically what I'm just mentioning here is if anyone wants to help out with any manual testing there, I know Jan already mentioned that he'd be happy to jump in there. He's already helped quite a bit with the kind of control plane side of the EKS implementation. So these node groups are coming in at V1 Alpha 1 because they are a new type. But they work together with the V1 Beta 1 EKS control plane side of things. And if you're interested in what this looks like from the Falco TBS episode, which was number 19, so that was the one before Packet, we actually used this on just a fork that I had at the time that was ready to provision some node groups on EKS. And in my opinion, it's an easier experience than even like EKS control or something like that. So definitely would love some testing on there. We're going to try and get in pretty quickly here, probably in the next 24 hours or so. It depends on if MoveOffix's around to give me some review there. But I would like that to be in our coming release.
So would you say that the next release of provider AWS like should just wait for this functionality?
I think it should because, without it, you're just going to have the control plane components, which is still useful because you can spin up your node pool separately if you want. But yeah, I would recommend we wait for it.
I agree. I mean, we have folks in the community that have been asking for this. And so we told them that it would be in 0.13. So if we could hold off on 0.13 until this was ready to land, I think that would be goodness. But yeah, getting it out sooner than later would be nice.
Yep, that sounds great then. Awesome.
I think it might actually be 0.11, but either way, next
release. Oh,
release.
Sorry, for provider AWS.
yeah, it's Crossplane, but yeah, same. I think everyone understood.
Great. Okay, and then so that is the end of everything we had on the agenda document for the core meeting group here. Before we move into the option time section, anybody have any other agenda items that they would like to bring up?
So we, Dan, I think you were working on the Helm chat for OM. I don't know if this is in the optional time or it's the main work item. In any case, I'd like to hear something about that before the end of this call.
Yeah, for sure. So it's in the optional section, but I think we can go ahead and chat about it. Phil, I know you were kind of thinking about how you wanted that to look, and I'm kind of doing implementation. So I'll let you start off, and then I'll kind of like pick up with any needed PRs and things like that would be required.
Yeah. So maybe I could just share real briefly to kind of maybe set some larger context and get some feedback on that, and then that might help inform kind of the discussion around the specifics around that Helm chart. So Jared, is that something that you could stop sharing and then I can share?
Oh yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I could totally stop sharing. There we go. Okay, my share has stopped.
All right, cool. So in terms of the roadmap and where we're thinking about moving with things like the Crossplane Connector Agent that basically kind of implements this new pull-based UX, is that's something that would be installed as part of this Crossplane application operator that could be installed on the target clusters. And so the general thinking there is that like if we're trying to provide this like really awesome user experience for Knative apps in Crossplane, and then you're able to install this Crossplane application operator. This isn't final yet. This is just kind of like the current thinking. that it would be nice to be able to install everything as a bundle, so that you'd have like the connector agent and Ohm, and you could just install one Crossplane app operator Helm chart that would have, you know, those things, and we could basically like flag what you wanted to install from that master thing, and that could be kind of, you know, just the unit of distribution for Crossplane for the K8's native app experience. And so what that looks like in a little bit more detail is just having the app operator be able to be installed on any number of the K8's clusters. And then with the Ohm stuff working locally to that cluster, it can just be like a layer on top of the requirements that you would create in that app cluster, as well as, you know, the standard, you know, deployments and services that are in Kubernetes for that. So wanted to kind of float that idea by everybody, and if we thought that that was a good idea, then that might help inform kind of what we do in more near term, like in 0.13 as a transition towards this potential end state.
So if I understand correctly, you are thinking of combine the connector agent and the OM package together. Is that what you're proposing?
So I think that, like, you know, underneath it would look like subcharts. So you'd have like a connector agent subchart and a Ohm subchart that perhaps, you know, we just have like the master builds in each of the repos for that. And then the Crossplane app operator would be in a separate repo that would basically be the official distribution of that, you know, that's like the Crossplane distribution. And then that operator Helm chart would basically just have flags that said, you know, you could opt in or out of any one of the individual components there. Yeah.
I see. Does that make, is that a conflict with OM have its own Helm chart?
I don't think so. So I think that Ohm can still have its own Helm chart, but just for like the dev or the master builds. And then like for the official distribution, I think we just want to have like a single official distribution. Otherwise it could get confusing, like, you know, in terms of what you're consuming.
Oh, I see. Now I get it. Why all those questions in the Ohm channel. Now I get it. Okay, I see.
I have a question.
Yeah.
This is Arthur. Is that a reason? What's the reason for keeping Ohm separate from the core Crossplane?
Oh, so we're moving to more of like a pull model. So before, basically, we had you know, these two models supported: embedded mode, where you just install Crossplane directly onto a target cluster and app cluster, and then it just worked locally there. And that's like for getting started. You create a kind cluster, you know, it's like a great like onboarding experience. But then how Crossplane was working before is that we would have more of a push model when it came to applications. And so here you would basically have Crossplane running as a standalone control cluster, and then you'd have, you know, the infrastructure APIs there, but you'd also have like Kubernetes application. We had like a WordPress application, which was like a package type, which would install there. And then it would effectively push that configuration down with deployments and services and namespaces to the target cluster and configure that there, and then basically push down the connection secrets for the infrastructure that was provisioned. And so this is basically just, you know, like a push model. And so what we realize is that it would be much cleaner if we want to enable you know, this consumer UX equally across all of the different existing tools and workflows, to have more of a pull model where you would basically replicate down all of the CRDs for the infrastructure requirements onto the app cluster with the agent there. So the agent would basically pull those CRDs down. And then the app teams could just create a single YAML file for a requirement for a database or a cache. And then that would basically get, you know, pushed up to the standalone Crossplane, and then the connection secret would be replicated down. But then all of the application configuration basically then was done just on that app cluster. So you didn't need to create a separate Kubernetes application and, you know, basically inline all your resources and all these things. And so it dramatically simplified everything and made a much cleaner consumer model for that. And so with that, basically the core stuff is really just the package manager and composition. And so package manager lets you install providers. And then with Dan's updates, it's also going to allow you to install composition-based packages that basically have, infrastructure definitions, requirements, compositions in there. And then that's basically what would be as part of the core. So when you look at that in a little bit more detail, I guess for this audience, it'd be okay to kind of pop down to this level. That as a platform builder, you're going to define your infrastructure definitions, the compositions that basically provide the classes of service for that infrastructure API, and then the publications. And then that basically makes those APIs available into one or more namespaces that basically, provide like a multi-tenant isolation boundary for that. And then whoever's owning the app clusters can just install the Crossplane Connector Agent there. And then that will basically pull down all of the infrastructure requirement CRDs. So the app teams can just create that single YAML file that's like, I need a database, I need a cache, that type of thing. And then that would basically push it up here and then pull the secret down when it's ready. And so this is basically the consumer experience instead of having to create a Kubernetes application and all the things associated with it. So since this is providing the Kubernetes native app experience, it probably makes the most sense to have Ohm and the connector agent bundled together as like a Crossplane Kubernetes or a Crossplane application operator that you can just install and then pick which install options you want here, so that if you want to define your applications with Ohm, that it would just layer very cleanly on top of the infrastructure requirements. And that's what we have in the getting started today and that kind of thing. So that was some of the thinking anyways.
Okay, thank you for the overview.
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, if that sounds agreeable to everybody, then I think the proposal would be is like, how do we like establish a stepping stone path from where we are now to this end state? And so, I mean, we could potentially create this Crossplane app operator Helm chart like for 0.13, but that seems like a bit of a stretch, like maybe it's like 0.14 we get that. So I think the proposal for 0.13 would be have that same type of subchart, flagging in the Crossplane core in 0.13. And then when we get the app operator basically as an official package, then, we can just move that behavior over. So we would have like in Ohm, a single like master channel for the Helm charts built off of, for each commit on master. And then, maybe we would name it something like, Ohm, private dev or something like that just indicated it was just, for kind of like development purposes there. And then we would be able to then include, a specific pinned version of that into the Crossplane primary Helm chart in 0.13, and then move that over to the Crossplane app operator Helm chart, maybe in 0.14. So.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Just to clarify one thing, as you mentioned, because seems like to me that we still don't have a Ohm chart yet. Is that something we can do relatively fast, or it has to tie up with this release cadence?
I think we can go. So when it's set up, the Ohm chart is published on every merge. So I think we can go ahead and get that going. And there's really just one minor change that we discovered when trying to troubleshoot why it wasn't being published. So I think we can go ahead and get that chart for master set up, and then we can work on getting that integrated as a subchart as part of core Crossplane for official releases.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
So Dan, is that something you think that you'd be able to fit in for like 0.13 in terms of like getting the master channel Helm chart in the Ohm, and then getting that bundled behind like a Helm values flag for the main Crossplane? Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know when 1.13 is going to come out at this point. Maybe we do it a little early if we're happy with this path, because this is a decently significant change. But I definitely think like this kind of, especially the Ohm master chart, I think we get going like today or tomorrow. And then in terms of integrating with core Crossplane, that might take a little more checking just to make sure we've got everything right, but very soon.
Awesome. Very cool. Okay. Well, I'll stop sharing and then turn it back over to you, Jared.
Great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Phil. And then Dan, let me know if you need anything from me in terms of the final configurations or setup for publishing the master or dev whatever channel of the Ohm chart.
Yeah, for sure. I think the one thing that was remaining was if we wanted to create a new bucket or use a subpath of the existing one for the output artifacts. Did you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I think just using the existing bucket and then a little subpath into it, that sounded, since the build system supports that, I think that's the least resistance and also fairly reasonable as well.
Awesome. Well, I should have a PR open to do that today then.
Awesome. That's great. And then also too, I think that what Phil was presenting there in terms of the direction we're going, and then the segment of Crossplane that focuses on apps, with like the Crossplane agent being able to provision infrastructure for apps, and then, the Ohm implementation within Crossplane that, absolutely is focused on apps. I think, but, that having a release vehicle for those is a fairly complete story on the application side that I think makes a lot of sense.
Sweet. Yeah, we're super excited about it too. So I think it's going to really make it a lot easier to kind of consume from Kubernetes apps and stuff. And we've been getting a lot of really good feedback on it. So yeah, excited.
All right, I believe I am again. And that is now the official end of the agenda items here. Any final agenda topics before we adjourn?
Oh, there was one. So on the providers channel, I think Nico was asking after an ECR managed resource. And so I wasn't aware that if we had one, so I just CC'd Dan, you, and Muvafik to see if you might know of one. But there's issue 149, which is kind of like the wrapper issue for that. So yeah, like if we basically just get in the habit of like dropping a comment on 149 with a link to like a new issue or something like that, that would be awesome. But yeah, we'll definitely add that to the list, ECR.
Yeah, for sure. I'm fairly certain we don't have that implemented right now, but I imagine it would be. I need to figure out from Nico exactly what they're looking for there, whether it's like actually creating a new repository or if it's something related to running containers from ECR. So I'll definitely check into that.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, maybe we can have that conversation in the providers channel. I just dropped a note in there, so. Yeah, it'd be good to know what his use cases are.
Alrighty. And then if that is the final agenda item, then can go ahead and adjourn, and we will touch on Slack and keep people updated about the Ohm chart and the 0.3 release.
Awesome. Thanks, Jared.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Happy Monday.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See y'all.